Welcome to 23 Degrees Sideways. Today we're going to talk about Heinlein. Heinlein. Author. Dude. Alright, so we're going to get a little wind because I came out to the desert, and I don't know why, but every time I actually come out to the desert, the wind picks up. It doesn't when I'm not recording. Like if I don't bring my camera, no wind. It's off and on right now. We definitely have thunderstorms moving in, which will be really nice because right now it's 102 degrees and like 70% humidity, and it is sticky. I hate it. It's horrible. Ugh. Can't wait for the monsoon to roll in. Anyway, Robert Heinlein. So I was having an argument about Heinlein recently. It's still ongoing. I have a real thing for Heinlein. I have been reading his stuff for 37 years. Been writing about it for over 25 years. I have some letters that I've written, got back when I was in the military with Virginia Heinlein, because she was, I joined the Navy in 1990 and RAH was dead. But I've given this a lot of thought. I have arguments about this stuff. I argue with Tom Kratman about whether or not his militaristic view of Starship Troopers is actually accurate. Militocracy is what I call it. His idea that Heinlein was writing very specifically about military service, not federal service, and how it's all boils down to the military. And, I have arguments against that. Like one of the secondary protagonists goes off to be a research scientist, not a grunt, but whatever. I've been doing this for a long time. I've read a lot about it. I've been to the archives. I am really into this, okay? I've been defending Friday for decades, and people still don't understand the idea of a story about what it means to be human. So I'm having this argument with this guy, and I've got a little animosity towards him. Our first real interaction was when he was promoting a list of prepper items, survivalist stuff, that was a appendix at the back of a book on a coming U.S. Civil War that was written by a white separatist wannabe mercenary who got all of his theorizing and his story from limited service in Yugoslavia, and his assumption that the ethnic groups and the races didn't mix right in Yugoslavia and all this other crap. And I've did that operation, and he's wrong. And his white separatist ideals are wrong. And anyway, I said, hey, it looks like we might have a civil war, a civil conflict of some sort. We had one in the 60s and 70s. We had one in the 1860s. We've gone through cycles of this, and I don't agree that this guy has his reasoning right. I think that it is much more ideological than it is racial. So this guy on the Discord accuses me of normalcy bias. Now, he doesn't know what it means. Okay, he has something called associative disease. I'll explain that in a little bit. But, I go on and I'm like, normalcy bias is not the problem here. I explain what normalcy bias is. I explain that I'm not saying everything is fine and there's nothing to see here. That's normalcy bias. And he keeps defending this. Like, he tries to twist things around because he can't be wrong, but he doesn't know what the words mean because he cannot accept input. This is what associative disease is. Every time you hear a new phrase, a new word, a new idea, you have to put it into a framework of being something you already know. Okay? You have to associate it with something so that you know what it is. So, for example, tanky. He had never heard the phrase tanky. So I tried to explain what this slang is, and it's slang for basically pro-Soviet, relatively Stalinist, communist party advocates in the United States. Now, in England, it has a slightly different meaning, and it came from England. It's been in use for a couple of decades. But, I had to explain it to the guy 6 times before I got to a point where I was like, yeah, whatever. You're close enough. Because every time I give an explanation or a definition, explain how it's been used, how it is being used on Reddit or Twitter, his response is an associated, oh, so it's exactly this. oh, so it's just this, is an association. He cannot accept new input. This is a really critical thing, and I need to do a completely separate video on that. You need to stop, open your mind, accept new input as something new sometimes. Associations are fine, okay? After analysis, first you have to accept the input. You can't use the association as a means of accepting the input. There. So, associative disease. Well, this Discord has a Heinlein quote channel, which I have a lot of fun with because I bring out some of the really nice esoteric long ones from letters instead of books. And, you know, people quote Heinlein characters a lot and then say that they are Heinlein quotes, which is not true. Not everything an author writes is actually his belief. You know, you look at Steve Sterling, who wrote the Draka books. If you do science fiction, you'll know what I'm talking about. The concept here is, what if the bad guys win? He's not, his characters, the ideas, the ideals of his characters are not his. He's writing a story about human characters in the bad guy wins situation. It's very different, okay? It's not even anti-hero, it's just, it's different. You know, and Heinlein did this a lot. You know, you can't say he is Jubal Harshaw. You can't say he is Lazarus Long. You can't say he is Johnny Rico. None of these things, Dubois would be a more accurate comparison. None of these things are true. Okay, this guy I'm arguing with actually debates that. He says that that is true, that is his voice, and I'm like, well. Anyway, Heinlein has a whole set of philosophies, prescriptive and proscriptive and descriptive, that he presented, and it developed. You know, what he wrote about in the 30s wasn't what he wrote about in the 80s, or the 70s more specifically. This is all important stuff, because a lot of libertarians use Heinlein as the ultimate rational anarchist, which is different topic. So I'm arguing with this guy because I put a quote out there, and I put a quote that is from Jubal Harshaw, Stranger in a Strange Land, that is the definition of prudery. What is a prude? A prude is a person who thinks that their values and hang-ups are laws of nature. Now, my specific reference on that was about a guy who does an in-range TV YouTube channel named Carl, who has recently been out like exemplifying prudery. His opinions are laws of nature. He comes across that way. At best of times, he has like a significant amount of that. And I sometimes present that, even though I don't believe it myself. But lately, he's been really bad with it, okay? He just denigrates and dehumanizes anyone who disagrees with his opinion. It's a little brutal. So I put this comment in there. This guy responds with, oh, that's Mrs. Grundy. Okay, if you don't know the quote, freedom begins when you tell Mrs. Grundy to fly a kite, is a reference from Lazarus Long, the Notebooks of Lazarus Long. Different character, different set of stuff. And that is a description or a prescription for freedom. It is a description of how one develops freedom in a particular type of Western culture. In our culture, freedom begins when you discover the ability to tell your second grade teacher to go fly a kite. That's a description of freedom. It's a description of liberty. It's a prescription for independence. This is how you do it. Tell the childhood authority figure to go fly a kite. That's how you get freedom. That's how you get liberty. It's not a proscription. Okay, how to avoid being a prude, how to avoid being a bigot. Okay, the prude comment is a description of one of the foundational aspects of bigotry. Okay, belief that your hang-ups are laws of nature. That's bigotry. Now this guy tells me I'm wrong. We go around and around about this because he literally cannot get the difference between the two things. It doesn't matter. And then he says it doesn't matter because all of Heinlein can be summed up as you do you. I argue against that. It's at a point in the argument I say, it's a lot more complex. Heinlein has a lot more going on. Starship Troopers, Stranger in a Strange Land, the trilogy, the social trilogy, have a lot more going on than you do you is the definition of all philosophy. And he's like, well, yeah, you're right, but you suck. He makes it into a personal attack. And it leads to this video, because I really want to talk about this, okay? I'd like to talk about it in a way where you can understand it without the intermediary of fuckhead, all right? The guy, really don't like this guy at this point. Here's the idea, all right? Freedom, liberty, the ability to think for yourself revolves around this idea, in part. Not completely, but in part, that you can tell other people to go fly a kite, okay? Being able, there's that fundamental, for me it really was in second grade. In second grade I discovered that they actually expected me to learn something with the lame-ass homework, and that it wasn't just an approval game to pat me on the head, like to make me feel good. And I realized that I didn't want that approval game aspect of it either. It's suddenly... it's really hard because you're 7 years old and you don't actually think very well. But I stopped doing homework. Freedom begins when you can tell them to go fly a kite. Think for yourself. Make your own decision. Make your own importances. Now, it's really hard when you're dealing with 7-year-olds, 9-year-olds, even 14-year-olds, because those are you do need help determining your importances. Because you can go way off into La La Land there. But whatever. Freedom begins when you can determine your own importances and can tell someone to go fly a kite. That they're not important to you. That their opinion, their prescription is not important to you. That's really important. I really want you to know that. Hope you're still listening to the video, but that's this is a big deal. It's a foundation of freedom. Equally important in its own sideways way is that proscription against bigotry. Don't believe that your hang-ups are laws of nature. I've got one that's especially for all my rationalist, libertarian, anarcho-capitalist, or scientific friends. Don't believe that reason and logic make your opinions into laws of nature. This is a really big one. This ties into pragmatism also. Just because you can build a logic tree or come up with some long convoluted set of reasoning, don't believe that your opinion, your hang-up, your hatred for this form of government or love for that form of government or anything, don't believe that that's a law of nature. Observe. Integrate. Inductive logic is so much better than deductive logic. All right? Prude. Bigotry. This is one of those things where slang has changed, but one of the primary bases of bigotry is the belief that your hang-ups and opinions are laws of nature. I would go out and I would say, hey, this is important. I would say this to progressives, and I would say this to the Marxists, and I would say this to the limousine liberals, and I would say this to the leadership of the Democratic Party, but it's pointless. They're not going to hear it. They're not capable of hearing it. I don't know why. And it's not a universal truth. There are progressives out there who, as individuals, might be able to hear it, but as a general thing, I'm not talking to them. I'm talking to you. If you're listening to this, it's really probably, unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to get a lot of the left actually listening here, so I'm telling you, libertarianish, conservative, imperialist, if there's another imperialist on the planet besides me, Jeffersonian federalist, whoever you are, your opinions and hang-ups are not laws of nature. They might be morally good, they might be morally bad, but they're not laws of nature. Prejudice and bigotry are based on that idea that your opinions, your hang-ups, your importances are laws of nature. Avoid that. I might be going too far if I tell people literally believe the other side for 10 minutes. It's a useful exercise. You can do it, okay? You can go through phases of life with it, Whatever. There's so much more to Heinlein. I feel like I want to do a series of videos on this. Like, the guy is so misunderstood and misused in so many ways, but that's a different topic, different time, and there's a lot of prejudice that goes into that, and man, that would be fun to explore. Right now, two things. Freedom begins when you get your own importances and you can tell other people to go fly a kite. Bigotry, one of the ways bigotry begins is believing that your importances and your hang-ups are laws of nature. They aren't. Stay sideways. Have a good one. We'll see you soon.